Winter should have ended 3 months earlier, yet the snow kept falling. Day after day, night after night. Entire villages disappeared beneath white silence. Rivers froze so deeply that even sunlight seemed unable to melt them. Children stopped laughing. Birds fell dead from the sky. And every midnight, people heard the sound of a woman crying somewhere inside the storm. No one dared search for her, because those who followed the voice never returned. Then one morning, without warning, the snow suddenly stopped. The skies cleared, and across the frozen earth, millions of crimson flowers bloomed at once. The people rejoiced. At last, spring had come. But by sunset, everyone who touched the flowers was dead. Their bodies remained frozen in place, with peaceful smiles on their faces. That was the day humanity realized something terrifying. The goddess of the seasons was no longer bringing balance. She was bringing her emotions. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, inside the silent kingdom of the dead, Persephone slowly opened her eyes. But the warmth once hidden inside them was gone. Long before humanity feared her name, Persephone had been adored. She was the gentle daughter of Demeter, the goddess whose footsteps awakened flowers. Where she walked, spring followed. Where she smiled, trees blossomed. And when she laughed, even the coldest heart softened. But everything changed after she became queen of the Underworld. The world remembered the story as a romance, but legends rarely tell what happens after the ending. Because after returning from the Underworld year after year, something inside Persephone began changing. At first, no one noticed. The winters became slightly colder. At first, people simply wrapped themselves in thicker wool and burned more firewood. But then the cold began lasting longer than anyone remembered. Rivers that had never frozen turned to solid ice. And the old ones whispered that the goddess's heart was slowly growing numb. The autumns lingered a little longer. Golden leaves refused to fall for weeks beyond their time. The air smelled of decay that never quite finished. Farmers watched their crops rot in fields that should have been ready for harvest. And somewhere beneath the earth, Persephone's sorrow stretched the season like a wound that would not close. Spring arrived late. The flowers that always bloomed at the first thaw remained buried beneath reluctant soil. Birds returned to empty nests with no insects to feed their young. Children searched for crocuses that never came. And the world began to understand that time no longer ruled the seasons. Persephone's mood did. Then came the nightmares. Farmers claimed they saw shadows moving beneath fields of wheat. Children spoke of a beautiful woman standing in snowstorms, watching them silently. Travelers found their own footprints disappearing behind them, as if something invisible followed. And every night, more people dreamed of a crown made of frozen roots. No one dared speak of these things in daylight. No one understood what the whispers meant. Not the farmers, not the priests, not even Persephone herself. But the wind kept carrying the same message across every kingdom. She is losing herself. And the world waited to see what would happen next. One evening, as golden leaves drifted through the air, Persephone stood alone beside a lake. Its surface reflected her face perfectly. But then the reflection smiled before she did. Persephone froze. The smile slowly widened, revealing teeth made of ice and shadow. And the reflection whispered, "Winter remembers what you truly are, not the gentle daughter of spring, but the queen who belongs to the dark." The lake trembled beneath her feet. The lake suddenly turned black as polished obsidian. A violent wind exploded through the trees, tearing branches from their trunks. Across the kingdom, flowers instantly withered into gray dust. Snow began falling from a cloudless sky, flakes as dark as ash. And far away, entire villages were swallowed by freezing storms. That came from nowhere. That was the first time Persephone lost control of the seasons. The gods above felt the earth tremble. The dead below whispered her name in fear. And somewhere in the deepest darkness, the first goddess smiled because the ancient cycle had finally begun again. The gods grew uneasy. Even Demeter began fearing her daughter, because the seasons no longer obeyed nature. They obeyed emotion. When Persephone grieved, winter spread like a plague across the land. Her tears became blizzards that buried mountains. Her sighs turned into winds that cracked stone. And every frozen lake was a mirror reflecting her heart. The world learned to fear silence, because silence meant she was remembering. When she became angry, summer burned forests into ash within a single afternoon. Rivers boiled where they stood. The air shimmered with heat that peeled bark from trees. Animals dropped dead with no wounds, except the fury in the sky. And at the center of every wildfire, people swore they saw a woman's silhouette made of flame. When loneliness consumed her, autumn covered entire cities in endless falling leaves. The leaves piled so high that doors could not open and windows shattered under the weight. The rustling sound never stopped, day or night, like 1,000 voices, whispering her name. And people walked through knee-deep decay, wondering if the goddess had forgotten they existed. And when rare moments of happiness returned, flowers exploded across the world so rapidly that vines strangled homes and cracked temple walls apart. The beauty was more terrifying than any storm because it came without warning. Nature itself had become unstable, no longer a cycle, but a scream. People began calling Persephone by another name, the two-faced goddess, the goddess of life, and the goddess of ruin. Rumors spread across kingdoms. Some believed Hades had cursed her. Others whispered that the underworld had poisoned her soul. But the truth was far older. One night, unable to bear the chaos any longer, Persephone descended into the deepest chambers beneath the underworld. Even Hades had forbidden anyone from entering them. The walls there were ancient beyond memory, and at the center stood a massive stone door covered in symbols that glowed like dying stars. As Persephone approached, the door slowly opened by itself. Inside, she discovered something impossible. A garden, hidden beneath the land of the dead. But every flower inside it was half alive and half decayed, beauty and death growing together. At the center of the garden stood an ancient woman cloaked in roots and frost. Her eyes carried centuries of sorrow. "You finally came," the woman said softly. Persephone stepped backward. "Who are you?" The woman touched a dying flower. "I was the first goddess of seasons." Silence filled the chamber. Then the woman revealed the terrible truth. The seasons had never been natural. Long ago, the world had nearly destroyed itself. Endless heat burned oceans dry. Eternal winters buried entire civilizations beneath ice. Nature had no balance, only suffering, without end. So the first goddess did what no god had ever done. She sacrificed pieces of her own soul to stabilize the world, piece by piece, season by season, until the chaos became a cycle. Her joy became spring. Every laugh she once shared, with the world transformed into blooming flowers and gentle rains. The warmth she felt in her heart became the warmth that awakened seeds from frozen ground. But with each spring she gave, a piece of her happiness faded forever. Her anger became summer. The fire inside her soul became the fire that ripened crops and painted sunsets red. Her frustration became the storms that cleared stale air from the world. But with each summer she granted, a piece of her rage remained trapped outside, leaving only cold emptiness behind. Her sorrow became autumn. Her tears became the rains that washed leaves from trees. Her grief became the golden decay that reminded the world that nothing lasts forever. But with each autumn she delivered, a piece of her sadness sank deeper into her bones, never to leave. And her loneliness became winter. The silence she felt inside became the silence of snow-covered fields. Her isolation became the frozen nights when no creature dared to move. But with each winter she sent, a piece of her own soul remained alone in the dark, forever separated from the warmth she once knew. And now Persephone was beginning to pay the price. Every winter was stealing warmth from her heart. Every autumn erased memories she loved. Every summer intensified her rage. And every spring slowly tore apart what remained of her humanity. Persephone realized the horrifying truth. The more she controlled the seasons, the less human she became. For the first time in centuries, the queen of the underworld was afraid. She returned to Hades in silence. But Hades had already sensed a change. The dead whispered everything to their king. That night, Persephone finally asked him, "Do you fear what I'm becoming?" Hades looked at her quietly. Then he answered, "The world loves spring because it is gentle." He stepped closer. "But the world survives winter because it is strong." Persephone lowered her eyes, and Hades whispered, "Both belong to you." For the first time in many years, Persephone cried. But the moment her tears touched the earth, the world began breaking apart. Across the planet, all four seasons collided at once. Summer lightning striking through blizzards, autumn leaves burning in spring sunshine. The sky itself did not know what season it was, and the gods looked down in horror. Snowstorms swallowed burning forests, while the flames still raged. Trees that were half-charred became encased in ice. Smoke froze mid-curl above the ground. Fire and frost danced together, like two sisters who hated each other, and no creature alive understood which element would kill them first. Lightning struck oceans that instantly froze solid, trapping ships mid-voyage. Sailors watched their own reflections in black ice beneath their feet. Thunder echoed from inside the frozen waves, and the sea became a graveyard of vessels suspended between storm and silence. Flowers bloomed from graves, crimson petals, pushing through coffin wood and bone. The dead slept beneath blossoms that smelled of both perfume and rot. Mourners found themselves stepping back from tombstones they had tended for years, because the flowers were beautiful, and that beauty felt like a threat. Entire cities vanished beneath hurricanes of autumn leaves so dense that daylight became twilight. Day turned to night without warning. Night turned crimson as the moon reflected Persephone's fractured soul. And humanity, for the first time, believed the end of the world had already begun. Temples collapsed under the weight of impossible weather. Stone ceilings shattered by hail the size of horses. People begged the gods for mercy in languages that had not been spoken for centuries. Priests abandoned their altars. Children hid beneath the bodies of their parents. But mercy did not come, because mercy, too, was a season, and all seasons now belonged to her. And through the chaos, they saw a terrifying figure walking across. The storm itself, Persephone. Half her body radiated spring. Flowers bloomed wherever she stepped. But the other half was surrounded by frost and darkness. The skies trembled in her presence, because for the first time, the goddess of seasons had stopped resisting her true nature. She was not merely the goddess of spring. She was every season, life and death, warmth and suffering, creation and destruction, together. But Persephone finally understood something else. Balance could not exist without pain. Spring only mattered because winter existed. Life only mattered because death waited beside it. And so, to save the world, she made the greatest sacrifice of all. She divided herself, not physically, but spiritually. One half of her soul became eternal spring. The other became eternal winter. One side gentle, one side feared. From that day onward, the seasons returned to balance. But humanity never forgot what they witnessed, and they never trusted spring the same way again. People celebrated spring festivals in her honor, but their songs were always softer than before. Their laughter always carried shadow, because deep in their hearts, they knew the truth. Spring was not forgiveness. Spring was only a pause between winters. Yet they celebrated anyway, because even a temporary gift from the two-faced goddess was better than no gift at all. Yet during winter, they locked their doors before nightfall and placed iron over their windows. They forbade their children from playing in snowstorms. And they whispered prayers to no god in particular, because they believed that somewhere inside the storm, the darker half of the goddess was still wandering alone, watching, waiting, grieving, and sometimes hungry. Even now, when winter arrives too early, the old people whisper her name carefully. They do not speak it loudly, lest she hears and remembers her loneliness. They cover their mouths when they say Persephone, during snowstorms, because they believe that if she hears herself being called, she might come looking for the voice that spoke her name. And when flowers bloom in impossible places, especially beside graves, entire villages leave offerings behind before sunset, because humanity remembers a truth the gods themselves once feared. The goddess who brings life is also the goddess who can take it away. And sometimes, during violent snowstorms, people still hear a woman crying in the wind, not with rage, not with hatred, but with unbearable loneliness. For the goddess of the seasons saved the world by sacrificing the warmth of her own soul forever. But perhaps the most terrifying part of the legend is this: the seasons are still changing. Spring still arrives. Winter still returns. Which means somewhere, even now, the goddess of the seasons is still watching over the world. And maybe the next storm is not just weather. Maybe it is her emotions. So before you trust the beauty of spring again, remember the goddess hidden behind it. And if you enjoyed stepping beyond the ordinary, then leave your mark upon this story. Like it, share it with those who still fear the storm, and subscribe before the seasons change again. Because the next legend may be far darker than this one.